Welcome to Paranormal Artist. My name is Alex, and I'll be taking you on some haunted adventures. Listener discretion is advised. This audio may not be suitable for all audiences. Madame Delphine LaLaurie was a wealthy socialite in New Orleans, Louisiana in the 1800s. I can say the mid-1800s to be safe. She was well known for her parties, and soon after that, she was well known as a bitch. A pitiful, demented, sick, and twisted excuse of a woman. So, basically, hear me out. American Horror Story is definitely one of my favorite TV shows. It's got a lot of seasons now, and I still like it for everything it is. My favorite season was, of course, American Horror Story Coven, based in New Orleans. It was definitely a great fucking season for that show. We had Kathy Bates playing Delphine LaLaurie, which was like spot on. She did fucking awesome. In my opinion, not necessarily saying that everybody has to agree, but for me, I'm a huge Kathy Bates fan. I think she killed that fucking role. Somehow or another, she always manages to kill the role of playing like a fucked up person, like a fucking absolutely insane, out of their fucking mind person. She has another movie called Misery. It's an old movie, but it's good. I love it. She also plays a fucking wild bitch. Crazy bitch. So, the place is located, the LaLaurie Mansion is located at 1140 Royal Street in New Orleans. And it's in the French Quarter, which is even better because the French Quarter is awesome. I love the French Quarter. I think it's cool. New Orleans itself is just like an awesome place to be. If you haven't been, I highly recommend going. There's ghost tours, the cemeteries, the voodoo shops. It's awesome. And like the sound of music is all over the place. And the beignets. Holy shit, the beignets are so good. I went there. I went to go see a plantation, and of course we were in the French Quarter. It was just, it was just a cool place to be. Really, I'm not saying the plantation was cool. I mean, it was cool. Obviously, not having slaves, enslaved people. That's not cool. But just seeing like a huge mansion just surrounded by these beautiful trees was cool. In case you're wondering, it was Oak Alley Plantation. Pretty cool. I don't even know what fucking movies were filmed there, but apparently there were movies filmed there. People have caught spirits there, because ghost is really not the word we want to use. So they have caught spirits at Oak Alley Plantation. Allegedly. I'm not sure. When I went there, there was a few things, but mainly I saw a lot of people. I do, however, have one picture in particular that stood out more to me than others. So in this picture, we were touring the slaves area, the slave living area. And as sad as it was, everything was preserved very decently over there. It was beautiful. Everything was green. I, of course, had a camera taking pictures, as I do. And one of the pictures, I caught something very interesting. So I'm talking about something completely different than what I'm going to talk about today. But this is all in New Orleans. New Orleans is just packed full of all this awesome history and everything. So in this particular area where we're touring around the slave quarters, slave area, you see in one of the photos something interesting. I believe I caught a partial apparition of a once enslaved person, because whenever I looked at the photo and then went into the house, I happened to see the exact clothes that I saw with this spirit that I may or may not have caught. See, I have to go back and look at the photos I took to make sure I did in fact see what I think I saw. But to me, looking at that picture, knowing that there was really nothing standing by where this person was or at all, it was just big empty area, and you could see like people in the background who were also touring the slave quarters, but in this particular area in general, there really shouldn't be anything there. At least that's what I thought. So going back on the photos, of course, you're gonna see it, you're gonna notice it. So later on, when I'm done with this episode, I'm gonna like just throw myself back into my pictures from New Orleans, and I'm going to find it. I'll post it on Instagram later, and it's gonna be cool. And I hope that I can find all of my photos that I have of like the paranormal shit, because I've got some crazy photos. I've got pictures I've taken with old phones. I've got pictures I've taken with a standard camera. I've got lots of pictures that people would probably enjoy to see. So anyway, getting back to the topic, New Orleans is awesome, in my opinion. I love it. I am so ready to go back there and just do my own thing. I want to spend at least a week there touring, ghost tours, visiting the cemetery, everything I can. Because the history alone, the ghost history of New Orleans is just fantastic to me. There's so many different ghost tours that you can go on. It's actually incredible. My favorite thing is probably going to the cemeteries, because the cemeteries, they're not like any other cemetery that we have in the US. You know, some cemeteries are underground, some cemeteries have more mausoleums, and other cemeteries, they are, you know, private for a whole family. But in New Orleans, these cemeteries are above ground. And it's fantastic. And, you know, I could do a deep dive on the cemeteries, but we're going to have to wait. Because right now, we are going to just throw ourselves at the whole entire history of Madame Delphine LaLaurie. And I'm going to tell you what a psycho bitch she is. And I hate using the word psycho because, you know, it's not a nice word to use. So I'm going to say Madame Delphine LaLaurie was a fucked up excuse of a human. That's really the easiest way to say it. And her mansion was just awesome. I would love to go inside of it and see. And granted, it's probably been restored and whatnot, but, you know, things are just to go in there, just touch the history, see the history, buy specifically a ghost book that's solely on the LaLaurie mansion would just be like awesome icing on the cake for me. I know that I have seen on social media a few people who have caught full-bodied apparitions in and around the French Quarter. Not necessarily saying that the LaLaurie mansion is one of those places that they did catch a full-bodied apparition, but isn't it cool to just think that somebody out there has possibly got a full-bodied apparition photo of fucking Delphine LaLaurie? Anyway, now that I've completely gone off topic and completely possibly off my fucking rocker, Delphine LaLaurie, born Marie Delphine McCarthy, was born in New Orleans, March 19th, 1787. She came from a family of wealth and power. Some members were military and government officials. Her father was Louis Bartholomew de McCarthy, knighted as the Chevalier of Royal and Military of St. Louis. Her mother was Marie Jeannie Larable, or Larable. I'm not sure how to say it. I'm not an expert at reading names. She was known for throwing massive parties that lasted throughout the night. So basically, being a socialite, a party animal, whatever you want to call it, is big, runs in her family. Her family owned 1,344 acres of land. She had 3 husbands and 6 kids at the end of all this. The first husband she got married to when she was just 14 years old. He was an officer to the Spanish crown and second in command to the Louisiana governor. His previous wife passed away during a voyage from Spain to Louisiana. He married Delphine in a private ceremony on June 11th, 1800. His name was Ramon Lopez y Angulo de Calendario. Ramon was angry with Spain. He rebelled against some of the laws they had, meaning that he brought over, quote, captives from Africa. The orders prohibited the importation until hostilities had settled and had become a more peaceful environment in the human trafficking trade, end quote. I got that from New Orleans legendarywalkingtours.com blog. It was also said that Spain reprimanded him for marrying without permission, and the crown removed him from his high-ranking position, and he was basically destined to travel for his job now. He was a lower-ranking person now, and he has to travel. So, by the time this happened, Delphine was pregnant with the first child, and she had gone to Havana to wait for him to come back from his voyage. However, he did not return. Allegedly, his ship hit a sandbar on January 11th, 1805, just off the shores of Havana, and he died. Shortly after, Delphine gave birth to their child, Marie Delphine Francisca Borja Lopez y Angulo. After his death, she found herself back home in New Orleans to find out that it was no longer under Spanish or French control, which I guess would have been good had he survived. The second husband was found, she married her second husband on or near her 20th birthday. His name was Jean-Paul Blanc. He was a good businessman. He was ruthless, nonetheless. It was said that when her mother passed, her inheritance was a great opportunity. He was active in politics and the slave trade. Now, you have to remember, this was the 1800s. Slavery was very much a thing. This is all pre-Civil War. And basically, as fucked up as it is, it's a part of our history that it's just something that we have. It's a stain on our history, but it is part of the United States history nonetheless, no matter how many times they try to eradicate that from textbooks. So he was active in slave trade and politics. He was supposedly associated with the pirate brothers Jean and Pierre Lafitte. So when Delphine's mother died, she had an inheritance that was roughly $33,000 $33,000 give or take. And her mother had a plantation with 52 slaves and some farm equipment. Delphine and the new husband were also gifted another plantation on Charles Street that also came with 36 slaves. Overall, the total inheritance was over about $2 million at that time. I'll have to come back at you guys with some, conversion shit, because honestly, that's a lot of money, and I know it's probably, doubled or tripled since then, because we're talking about money in the 1800s. So if anybody knows a way to do that, or how to, help me math and understand exactly what is going on with this money situation, that would be fucking fantastic. They had about a little over $2 million with all the inheritance. Jean-Paul Blanc bought a 2-story house, and by 1815 they had 5 children. Just 5 children, so I'm assuming 4 of them came from Jean-Paul, and the first one obviously came from Ramon. So the Battle of New Orleans was from 1814 to 1815, and that's roughly when Blanc died. He left her with all the kids. She was 28 years old and had over $160,000 in debt, which is also probably tripled or more because we're talking about the 1800s. Over the next decade, she was able to get rid of most of the property and settle the debts that she had, and she also managed to get some slaves, some enslaved people. I hate it's such a fucking touchy topic, the slave thing. I I'm not comfortable saying it, but I mean, like I said earlier, it's a fucked up part of our history, and this is just what we have to deal with. This is the stuff that I've learned about this woman. So over these years, in a 5-year span, these slaves passed away, all with the causes of death unknown or listed as unknown because they covered things up. So basically, since Blanc left her in pretty much fucking financial ruin, when her father passed away in 1824, he left his kids a free woman and a couple of enslaved people and $5,000 at that time each. So, 1825, just a year after the father died, she met Dr. Louis LaLaurie, who came from France. He was a doctor. He wanted to open his own practice. Basically, he was a chiropractor. And if you don't know what that is, those are the people that go there and like pop your back, you know? They adjust all your stuff. They're cool. The year after that, after he arrived, it was 1826, she brought her kids to be, quote, straightened out, and that's when their story begins to unfold. And see, Delphine was already in her mid to late 30s by the time she met Dr. LaLaurie. She had 5 kids and she was a widow to her 2 husbands, and she was fucking loaded. So when they got married, he was 25 years old, which is like significantly younger than her at that moment. And before they knew it, they were expecting. So she had yet another child on the way. They went to the St. Louis Cathedral to make the marriage official, but had it postponed for 6 months. See, being that she was so high in society as she was, socialite and whatnot, it was frowned upon that there was a wedlock child. So I'm guessing that's why they had to postpone the thing. Which you have to remember, this is back in the day. This is the 1800s. Several fucking years before we start normalizing pretty much anything. And basically when the 2000s hit, the 90s, 2000s, that's when we started normalizing shit, more and more at least. I mean, some people still live in that fucking Neanderthal fucking type mindset who think that we don't all have rights and you can't do this because you're frowned upon. Whatever. You know. So that's basically it. The whole thing is, it's just stupid, but you know, you have to remember, society was different. The church was very, very much controlling, and people just would get offended by shit. I mean, come on, this is like, what, 100 years, maybe 200 years after the Salem witch trials, where they were just accusing fucking women for no reason because their kids said, oh, I got possessed by a witch or something like that. Delphine's worth $66,389.58. That's what I found online. Not sure if that's true or not. In today's money, she's goddamn loaded. Like, she's like fucking 2 times, 3 times more loaded than she would be if she had been alive in today's society. Letters were written to the friends stating that there was basically trouble in paradise. And if you don't know what that saying means, think about it. We all want to have a paradise. We all want to live in a happy area where there's no problems of the world. But that's just not a realistic thing. It's just not realistic. And for some people, it's definitely not realistic. Some people have to fucking deal with some fucked up shit. And sometimes the person you love is a twisted fuck. And that's basically what I put the saying with, is that the trouble in paradise is, you know, somebody's way of saying the marriage ain't good, the marriage ain't right. And along with those letters that were being sent discussing the troubled marriage, there was also some mention of how the slaves were treated. before we even open that fucking can of worms, I have to let you guys know it is beyond fucked up. So fucked up that I have to do this. But let me stop there before I get ahead of myself. By 1831, the famous LaLaurie mansion was purchased. That's the one that's in the French Quarters. The one that I would love to see. The one where supposedly this person caught a full-bodied apparition in a photo. That's what I want to see. So, back to the marriage. They were rumored to have constantly been fighting and having to get out of each other's way, go to completely separate areas of the house in order to cool off before they can meet again. And by November 16th, 1832, she petitioned to be separated from her husband, stating that he would treat her like ass, treat her terribly, and would beat her. So not only is he, or are they fighting, he's physically abusing her. And again, I'm not giving her any kind of excuse for how she is. She's a fucked up human. And I'm glad that she was in the period that she's in, because just no. So as we move on to where I said she's a fucked up excuse of a human and I have to do this, I'm putting a trigger warning right here. This is going to be very, very descriptive. And as much as I want to try to eliminate the gore, I'm going to put it, because it would just take away from the rest of the whole shit going on. From 1831 to 1834, people would see the enslaved people coming out of her house and describe them as looking wretched and terrible. And I'm assuming also malnourished. Granted, listen, people of color were not treated as equals back in that time period. You have to get that understood. If you were not white, that's it. You're done for. Not really, but honestly, really, you would be done for. Like, it's their word against yours. You were considered less than society. Your fucking vote didn't even count. And this is before they even had the slaves, colored people. This is before any rights were had. So her enslaved people looked like shit. Unhealthy, sickly, wretched, terrible, malnourished. Horrible. But when people were around, LaLaurie, she treated them well. She was seen often treating her enslaved people with polite manner and taking care of their health. And even to other African Americans that were around at that time, people of color, she was seen being generally nice to them. And, shocker, within a 4-year span, quote, 12 slaves were registered, but their cause of death was never mentioned, end quote. Again, that's from the New Orleans Legendary Walking Tours. What does that mean? That means these people, 12 people who were registered under the LaLaurie mansion, who were owned by the LaLauries, died. Mysteriously. And I say mysteriously because the death was never mentioned. There is no cause of death listed. The rumors were spreading around New Orleans about the mistreatment of the enslaved people under the LaLaurie mansion. So much so that they actually sent a lawyer to investigate to see if these rumors were true, to see if she was actually treating her enslaved people as in the way that the people were saying on the street. However, another shock, he was unable to find any signs of the enslaved people being mistreated. Big shock, right? I know we're all just like, oh, gasp, right? No. So despite that, the rumors still continued. Delphine LaLaurie had to give up 9 of her slaves to be resold. However, because she's a sick fucking bitch, She had prearranged for her family to purchase the slaves that she lost, therefore returning them back to her mansion, where we can only imagine the horrors that they faced. You would think that, having a punishment of having your workers taken away would at least give you a little bit of insight, like maybe I should be a better human. No, not at all. In fact, I think from what I'm understanding is that shit got even more intense for these poor people that had to sit there and work for this wretched woman. She is a complete fucking bitch. Twisted, sick, demented. That is all that can describe Delphine LaLaurie. This is where shit begins to unravel for her. This is like the fucking tip of the iceberg here. And the more you learn about her, the more disgusted you get. Because, like I said, I thought Jeffrey Dahmer was a fucked up human, and don't get me wrong, he is fucked up. But Delphine LaLaurie and the shit she allegedly did is so fucked up to me too. They are neck and neck in my level of like most fucked up shit to happen. And I know that I'm saying that a lot. Get me? Those of you listening, I say shit. I can repeat shit sometimes. I'm sorry. But this is just my normal speech pattern. So where things really fucking started hitting the fan was an incident involving a 12-year-old enslaved girl. She was brushing Madame Delphine LaLaurie's hair, and she hit a tangle. She snagged a tangle with the comb. Ooh, that pissed her off because it hurt her delicate little head. Delphine was inconvenienced and slightly pained, so she flew into a fucking rage and chased this child with a whip, allegedly, to the roof of this mansion. And this is a big mansion, okay? For the time. It's 2 stories, and if you haven't, the buildings in New Orleans, they're taller, they're long, they're beautifully constructed. Let's just say that. So, this girl either lost her footing or was shoved off the roof of the LaLaurie mansion. And a few witnesses did see this. So, after that, things are starting to slowly get exposed. Very fucking slowly. The question is, was she pushed or did she actually slip and fall? Will we ever know the answer? Probably not. Only those who were there can tell us. And those people are fucking long gone. So, since she was killed, there's no clear answer to whether she was buried in the mansion, on the grounds of the mansion, not in the mansion, or simply shoved and dumped into a fucking well of the property. I know I'm cussing a lot, but it's really the only way that I can fully express my disgust with this woman. I'm sorry, I will cut back. So she was either dumped down a well or buried somewhere on the mansion property. Despite having her slaves taken away, I truly believe that this right here was just the beginning of just horrid treatment for these poor people. I think she treated them worse. And see, after watching a few videos about Delphine LaLaurie, I learned that being the cook of the house, that was not the fucking place to be. It was the worst place to be, actually. That's what I learned. I'm gonna keep saying it. This was a time where colored people were not seen as equals. And you gotta understand. People of color were enslaved, forced to work for these masters, these slave owners, to do everything for them and still get punished. if something wasn't 100% perfect. You gotta understand, this was a fucking stain on history, but it happened nonetheless. So the cook in the LaLaurie mansion was a 70-year-old enslaved woman who was chained by her ankles to the kitchen stove where she cooked and prepared the meals for the LaLaurie family. Even LaLaurie's kids, Delphine's fucking own kids, saw this as disgusting, or so I read. And they tried to get the woman unchained from the stove because she's probably not sat down, not slept, nothing. So they saw it as fucked up too. And these are kids who were raised to believe that they are the supremacy, you know, they are white people, they're not people of color, they're privileged, they're rich, they come from money. And for them to see this poor old woman chained to a thing and actually have like a slight amount of empathy for her, and to you know, to the point where they want to free her, and fucking Delphine LaLaurie decides, I'm gonna punish you for doing this, for trying to be right and freeing my slave from her stove position. So the kids were punished. Now, I don't know if this is true or not because I really wasn't able to find a whole lot else on this. But let's just say this is where the downfall truly begins for Madame LaLaurie. So April 10th, 1834. This is truly a time where shit hit the fan. So, again, trigger warning. Big boy trigger warning. Remember this 70-year-old lady who's chained to the stove that I talked about just a second ago? Yeah. She is the reason for what unfolded in the LaLaurie household. That's when all the secrets definitely got exposed. This woman, this 70-year-old woman who is chained to the stove with her fucking ankles, by her ankles, is the reason that this happened. She was trying to either end it all or avoid the severe punishment that was to come for whatever mishap she may have had while prepping a meal or doing anything in the slightest to inconvenience Delphine. She started a fucking fire. That's right. She started a fire. Out of fear or suicidal ideation, she started a fire that opened the entire can of worms for Delphine LaLaurie. She managed to survive. She was found by the fire marshal. There were bystanders who were trying to enter the slaves' quarters. However, our lovely hero, Delphine LaLaurie, was not letting them in. She wouldn't give them the keys. She wouldn't do anything to let them. Once they got past her, they busted the door down. And what they came across is something that you wouldn't be able to fully grasp if you yourself were standing there. It is so horrible, so fucking terrifying that it's horrible. Like, I don't even have a word. It is disgusting that these poor people had to do it. So the slave quarters were, I read more of the slave quarters being in the basement, but I've also seen in the attic. So I'm going to assume it's the basement for sure. There were 7 slaves in the basement, locked away as if they were in a fucking horrible prison. They were mutilated and disfigured in so many fucking ways. They were just basically, I'll put it in my own words, non-recognizable as humans. They were so disfigured. I got that from a YouTube video. That's where I learned about this stuff. I watched a couple of videos and read a lot of articles, and Basically, it's God bless. I hope that these poor souls get the rest that they need, that they are resting peacefully, or they have been reincarnated into something, somebody more free and humane. I just want their souls to be at rest, because it's quite sick. The New Orleans Bee, which was a newspaper from back at that time, I don't think they have it anymore. Unless they do, that's pretty impressive. But the New Orleans Bee quoted, upon entering one of the apartments, the most appalling spectacle met their eyes. 7 slaves, more or less, horribly mutilated, were seen suspended by the neck, with their limbs apparently stretched and torn from one extremity to the other. These slaves were the property of the demon in the shape of a woman. They had been confined for several months in the situation from which they had thus providentially been rescued, and had been merely kept in existence to prolong their suffering and to make them taste all that the most refined cruelty could inflict. And that's a quote from the New Orleans Bee in April 11th, 1834. Wow. It's horrible. So, some of the stuff that I read, get ready for this, trigger warning. I know I said it like 3 times, but like, listen. If it's disgusting to me, and it takes a lot to like fucking gross me out, or even like get me thinking that that's like give me chills, kind of disgusting, I guarantee you it's gonna fuck you up. Some of the victims reeked of death. They smelled like death, possibly dying tissue, something like just, they smelled of death. They were said to have been in iron collars. And I say iron collars. I keep getting that wrong. Iron spiked collars. So that means they couldn't turn their head whichever way they wanted, because they were going to get stuck, possibly by rusty old fucking irons that were sticking out of these collars into their necks. There was another older woman, supposedly, who had a massive gash on her head that was so bad, probably deeply infected, and basically, from what I read, allegedly took away her ability to walk. All alleged, not sure if that's true or not. Another one had their stomach or their abdomen cut open, and their intestines either wrapped around their body or placed in a bucket near them. Sick, right? Horrible. Another one, or like, these are just some of the things. Some of them just, I'm stuttering. It's so fucking gross. Another one had her mouth pried open, stuffed with shit, with feces, and then sewn shut. Some of them were in shackles, hanging from their limbs that were probably all dislocated, because this is Delphine LaLaurie we're talking about. You know, that's all I have to say. And one of them allegedly had a hole drilled into their head with a wooden spoon sticking out to swirl or stir their brains around like some kind of disgusting fucking soup. There were some with broken bones that were placed back in the positions that would keep them from healing properly, disfiguring them and rendering them, hate to say it, useless. Rendering them useless. Granted, a lot of these were written years after this was discovered. I mean, like, in the 1900s years. So it's not sure. None of this has been supposedly recorded in history, except for, like, that quote from the bee. That's the only thing. So this person that wrote it, they supposedly ran a ghost hunting, ghost tour type deal, and they came up with these descriptions that may or may not have happened to these enslaved people. Now, just because they're stories doesn't mean, things get stretched over time. People lose the truth over time because the stories get passed down from generation to generation to generation. And really, it's not 100% guarantee that something is happening this way or happened this way. It's kind of like if you've heard the game Telephone. And if you don't know what that is, Telephone is kind of an old game from back in the day. Somebody would say something, whisper it to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, and the further that you got into the game, the more stretched out or less detailed or more detailed the thing would get. I'm not really sure, I haven't played that game since I was like 5. Because this stuff may or may not be fabricated by somebody who's just trying to make a quick buck, there's really no telling whether or not the story is true. So for me, I'm just thinking, okay, because it's this time period and because Delphine LaLaurie is a fucked up human, I believe it's true to an extent. I believe that it is possible that she did do what was described in the stories the articles and the videos that I read and watched. I firmly believe that she was perfectly 100% capable of doing such things. And remember how I said her husband was a doctor? Yeah. They were allegedly doing medical experiments on these poor enslaved people who were trapped for months on end inside of this attic. So there is a death legislator that says between 1830 and 1834, 12 enslaved people were killed in the mansion with a cause of death not listed. Another quote I got, this is from Legends of America. Quote, "The deaths included a cook and a laundress named Bonnie, along with 4 of her children," end quote. So once word of how the slaves were treated got out, that's when all hell breaks loose. Delphine LaLaurie is pretty much shunned by society. Angry mobs everywhere she went, so bad that her and her husband and they all had to fucking flee. They fled. The mansion got fucking destroyed. I think the only thing that was actually left of the mansion after all this came out was basically the fucking walls. And maybe like a couple chimneys, if there's chimneys in it. Basically, that's it, because there were swarms of people surrounding the mansion, pissed off, angry mobs everywhere. By the time the authorities came, there was so much damage to the mansion that it was pretty much just barren. So, they fled. However, as they fled, on the property, several bodies were fucking found. And guess what? They're enslaved people. Because what else would you do with your workers, your helpers? What else would you fucking do but kill them, right? No, you don't. Killing people isn't right, first of all. Don't do that. That's bad. But the fact that they found more bodies on the property after the LaLauries fled? Amazing. Just sick, but amazing. So first they went to Mobile, Alabama, and then they made their way all the way to Paris, France. So after their escape, the bitch is dead. Several years. She lived to be 60 years old. She died in Paris. She went unpunished for her crimes, of course, because, fuck society, I guess. Also, because she fled. So she went unpunished for her crimes. She died on December 7th, 1849, at the age of 60. Like I said, she lived to be in her 60s. It's been said that she died in a hunting accident, but supposedly there were letters sent between the kids discussing a long-term illness that she was dealing with. And that's possibly what ended up killing her in the end. So, years after her death, some people discovered a plaque in the St. Louis No. 1 cemetery that has her name on it. And going back, allegedly in 1851 in Paris, they exhumed her body and shipped her back to New Orleans. So that's at the end. So now, what was done with the mansion after all that? Right? What was done with the mansion after it was destroyed and the LaLauries fled? Well, in 1838, the property was purchased by Charles Caffin and rebuilt by Pierre Trestor in the, quote, Empire style, end quote. There was another floor added, making it the highest building for squares around. Then it was made into a high school, a music conservatory, apartments, a bar, a refuge for troubled teens at that time, and a furniture store. In 2007, Nicolas Cage bought the mansion for $3.45 million, but due to financial issues, it was then foreclosed to the bank. So that leaves, what is the mansion doing now? Right now. Last I read, it was still owned by the bank. But it's got to be a huge horror attraction now, thanks to American Horror Story. It was featured on American Horror Story, where, once again, I'll mention, my favorite actress, Kathy Bates, portrayed Delphine LaLaurie. And, God, that season was amazing. But you're probably wondering, where's all the spooky shit? This sounded like all true crime and history. Surprise! There's going to be a second part. Because there was so much about Madame LaLaurie herself that I couldn't get to the haunted stuff because I wanted you guys to understand just what kind of level of fucked up this person is. And also, go watch American Horror Story Coven. Because why not? It's a great season. I guess that's what I can leave you with is you're going to have to come back for part 2 to find out what happens. Were the spirits? Is the LaLaurie mansion haunted? That's what we have to find out now. So, just as always, if you guys have been to the LaLaurie mansion as it stands today, or anywhere near the French Quarter, send me an email. Let me know what you've experienced. Because really, I want to find out. I want to know everything. I want to know the details. Because I live for this shit. I live for the paranormal world. You can email me at paranormalartistpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to leave some kind of suggestion of other things I should do, or you want me to go into a deeper dive of New Orleans itself, let me know. So you all know, I have to put the suicide and crisis hotline on the end of all my podcasts just because it's something I'm really passionate about. I really want to help the prevention of suicide. So if you're having any suicidal ideation or you are feeling suicidal, call or text 988. They're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year. If you want to find me on social media, you can find me on Instagram at AlexAgain with 2 underscores, or you can find the podcast Instagram, paranormalartist.podcast. If you want to send me any kind of suggestions or anything, reach out to me on social media. I have email, Patreon, and Instagram. I don't have any other social media. That's it. That's all you're going to find me on. Welcome to Paranormal Artist. My name is Alex, and I'll be taking you on some haunted adventures. Listener discretion is advised. This audio may not be suitable for all audiences. Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2. I know, I left you guys on a cliffhanger. Shouldn't have done that. That's bad on me. But I had to because the history for the LaLaurie mansion and Delphine herself were so big. There's so much history that I just had no choice. So anyway, moving on, we gotta talk about the ghosts, the spirits. I hate saying ghost, but I guess I'm gonna have to just let it go and be like, okay, this is something that I'm gonna have to deal with because everybody really knows it as a ghost. or something like that. That's how I see it. So, as I've said before, New Orleans is fucking haunted. Like, I firmly 100% believe that New Orleans is 150%, if not more, haunted. Simply because of the amount of history there, the amount of voodoo that happens there. Just the whole city itself is just how do you even say? It's got an eerie vibe to it, and it's awesome. And I love that city. Will I live there? Probably not. Like, ever. But nonetheless, New Orleans is great. I just got back from out of town, and you know when you find stuff that you haven't seen in a long time and it just brings back like some good memories? Yeah, that's happened a lot to me this weekend. Just a couple things, not anything really significant, but just stuff that meant a lot to me. I also went to go play Dungeons and Dragons with some friends. So I've had a busy weekend, okay? That's why I haven't been able to get this recorded until now. And it's going to be like a few days before I get the next episode. So it's like everything's coming in all at once. And it's like, hey, there's like a little tiny avalanche happening above me. Anyway, so I mentioned before that LaLaurie has been mentioned in American Horror Story and played by my personal Lord and Savior. It's a joke. I'm not serious. By Kathy Bates, like one of my favorite actors ever, period. If you haven't seen any of her movies, go watch Misery. Just go watch Misery. And then when you're finished with it, just know, for an old ass movie, it gets you fucked up a little bit. So New Orleans has lots of voodoo, lots of history. God, so much history. Actually, some that I didn't even know about whenever I was doing the history portion of this episode. And I think it's it's safe to say I learned quite a bit about it. So I'm going to go back around. As I said, it was played in American Horror Story or mentioned in American Horror Story. LaLaurie was played by Kathy Bates, which she killed the role. In my opinion, she killed the fucking role. But guess what? There's spirits still. It's considered to be one of the most haunted locations in the French Quarter. Several reports of paranormal activity and happenings have been reported there over the past 200 years. Pretty much since the whole fucking city became a thing, it has been having these hauntings, if you will. There's everything from unexplained noises to disembodied voices and feeling negative energy. Now, this is at the LaLaurie mansion, not necessarily the city as a whole. Just the LaLaurie mansion. Remember, that's all I'm talking about, despite the fact that I've completely gotten off topic just within like the 5 minutes I've started this. So anyway, there is unexplained noises, disembodied voices, a heavy negative feeling. Okay, I don't know if I've explained it before, but have you ever just like, you feel the vibe of a room, you know, if it's chill or if it's not chill or something like that. Basically, when you have a negative entity or a negative energy, not entity, oops, I went too far. When you have a negative energy, you can feel that shit. You can feel it deep inside of you. You know the vibe ain't right, then you know the vibe ain't there. I need to start speaking like a human. Whatever, who cares? The vibe isn't there, regardless of this whole thing. Like, you can just walk into a room, the rest of the house is nice and chill, but you can walk into one room and get that feeling of negativity there. And it feels heavy and you feel something is wrong. Like, I don't know how to explain it. You if you've experienced it, then you know what I'm talking about. There have been reports of a woman with long red hair who glares at people in several areas of the mansion. Did I mention that Delphine was a redhead? No, probably not. It's okay, I miss some details every now and then. In the 1870s, children would say that they would hear sounds or have some kind of paranormal experience. And, you know, adults, parents, would just kind of pass it off as them having an overactive imagination. Basically saying, nah, you're not experiencing that. That's all in your head. The cries of a child can be heard in the courtyard. Chains can be heard going down the stairs. screams have also been heard from the attic. Now, remember, I said I don't know for sure 100% if the incident took place in the attic or the basement, but you can hear screams. That's that residual energy from everything that happened in that mansion, or in that room, I should say. And supposedly, windows can open and close on their own, and the door will just open by itself. That's pretty nifty. I guess the door would be kind of helpful in the case that your hands are full and you might need a hand. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what I would do if, like, a door opened on its own for me. Probably have a mild panic attack and be like, what's going on here? But I've seen the videos. It's kind of unexpected. I like watching those videos where somebody's filming themselves and they're talking about, like, this experience they're having in their house and the fucking door just opens behind them. I love those videos because the look of shock on my face and their face is the exact same. There is a story of the entity. That's what I called this portion. In 1894, there was a tenant. Whenever the mansion was in its apartment era, there was a tenant that was supposedly murdered. They found the apartment ransacked, torn apart, ripped, everything was everywhere. Valuables weren't missing, but police assumed it was a robbery. And a friend of that victim claimed that he was dealing with sprites or spirits in his home. The same friend of the tenant who was murdered also said that he was being tormented by a, quote, demon in the house who wasn't going to rest until he had met his end, end quote. Did the demon cause the death of the tenant? It's possible. How is it possible? Well, think about this. People have died getting exorcisms, supposedly. People have died by just self-harm. There's a lot of ways that things can happen in the paranormal world that can possibly cause death. I mean, if we're talking about somebody getting possessed, there's a chance that they can cause harm to themselves and to others. So if this demon supposedly just caused a whole fucking chaos for this person, it's possible that they themselves have harmed themselves in a way. Or hell, maybe the demon even went to somebody and just, like, attached to maybe a guest he had over at the apartment, and when he returned, just caused a fucking chaos from hell and killed this tenant of the apartment. It's very possible. It really is. I mean, you can basically bring a negative entity into your house by shopping at a thrift store and buying something that's kind of weird looking, or it could be just something innocent. Like, I'm not saying dolls are innocent, because they are not innocent, so I'm not even... Dolls? No, but a child's toy can have something attached to it. The pitcher, you know, that you pour, like, tea or lemonade out of, that can be haunted. Or, not haunted, good lord, I'm losing my fucking life. It can have an attachment. You just... From what I've learned over all my years of watching paranormal stuff and listening to podcasts and all that, don't buy it. Don't thrift it. It's not worth it, because especially if it's a doll, it's probably got some shit on it, and you really don't want that in your house. I know... I think it was a gag gift one year for Christmas. Somebody in my family got my dad a creepy ass porcelain doll. I don't know what's happened to the doll. I haven't seen it, like, in years, but it was so funny. And I was like, who the fuck decided to bring this shit into the house? No, thank you. I'm gone. And he put it up. Haven't seen it since. Don't plan on looking for it. But another thing is, I'm terrified of Raggedy Ann dolls. It doesn't matter if they're brand new or not. They're not coming near me. I don't want them near me. But listen, if you're going to a fucking antique store and you're just deciding that you're gonna buy one of these dolls that's, like, demented looking and, like, all kinds of cracked up and shit, don't come near me with that thing. Don't even talk to me about that. I don't want it. Dolls are creepy. I can't handle that. That's a lot of pressure. It's too much. Like, you know, especially the dolls where their eyes are, like, they close or something when you like angle them at a certain way, or the dolls that are like interactive where they like suck the bottle or whatever. Like those are new dolls from like Target and shit. It doesn't matter. Don't bring it near me. I don't like it. I can take Barbie for whatever reason. I can handle Barbie. But anybody else, like those like realistic looking dolls that they have, like they're like fucking $200. No, thank you. Antique dolls, no. An Amish doll that's got no face, no offense, but no, fuck no. And you're probably like, why the hell does an Amish doll not have a face? I mean, some of you might know, but they don't like the dolls to have the faces because it can bring like negative entities or something like that, or it's like maybe it's not even fucking paranormal at all. I think it's something to do with the devil. Something to do with the devil. But I can't, like, I used to know, like that, like, off the top of my head, but I haven't thought about it in so long. There's a show, I think, on Discovery Plus or whatever that is an Amish haunting. I've been kind of wanting to watch it, but I haven't gotten there yet. I went completely off topic. I'm sorry. So, don't go to a thrift store and buy any kind of object that may look or have a feeling of being cursed, because you're gonna bring some shit into your house. And anyway, that's basically how you can get an entity into your apartment that can attach to another person or yourself and cause all kinds of harm. That was a lot. I'm sorry. That was a lot. I have really weird, like, little things that I can remember just off the top of my head. Another story from the apartment era of the mansion is from a worker who was heading back to his own apartment when he had an experience with this apparition. And remember, just a few minutes ago, I said that kids were also having weird experiences that were unexplainable or paranormal. So just keep that in mind. Basically, he had an experience with an apparition. He described the apparition as a large African American man in chains blocking the stairway, end quote. I got that from homespunhaints.com, whatever that is supposed to actually say. The worker tried to tell the entity to move out of the way. He got aggressive with the entity because it's not going to respond. It's a fucking entity. It's a spirit. It's just an apparition. So he gets pissed off and shoves, or makes an attempt, I should say, to shove the spirit out of the way. Well, surprise, surprise, his hand went through and that scared the shit out of him. And then the entity, the apparition, just dissolved, went away, disappeared before his eyes. After that, he went and told everybody about his experiences, and that's when the people started believing the kids. And I'm like, wow, it only took you guys like several lifetimes to realize the kids were telling the truth. And it goes back, kids will always see shit before the adults do. And I cannot stress that enough. Kids see shit. Kids see things that we can't. And that imaginary friend, I've talked about it before. It's probably not imaginary. I guarantee you it's probably not imaginary. I get triggered. It's not even a trigger. It's like, I'm telling you this. I know that one of my siblings had an imaginary friend growing up, or when they were little, and I'm like, that's creepy. But then I think, okay, is it actually, or is this like a thing? Is this like an actual imaginary friend? I don't know. I'm not planning on asking, and I'm not going to tell the whole shit on here because nobody really needs to know that, nor do they care. But if your kid is talking to somebody that's got like a very adult name, like from the 20s, you might want to check and see if this is an actual person. I'm not saying that your kid's got some issues going on. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just simply stating that your kid might be talking to some spooky shit. That's all I'm gonna say. And don't, for the love of Jesus Christ, do not bring a Ouija board into your house and play with it there. Don't do that. Because then you're gonna open yourself up to some other shit. And then you're gonna have a ghost and a demon walking in there. If you haven't heard of the Zozo demon, look the fucking thing up. I'm just saying. There's a lot of stuff you need to like be very careful of. And I've heard of people burning Ouija boards. Yeah, don't do that either. Close it out. say goodbye, and then do with the board what is appropriate. Don't burn it, don't chunk it. Just make sure that the board is cared for properly. That's all I'm going to say about that. So after the worker went and told everybody about this spirit that he saw, this full-bodied apparition, everybody started getting scared, and people naturally just started moving out because they're scared. Nobody wants to live in a haunted house that I know of, except for me probably, but even then, I don't want to live in a haunted house. I want some peace. I don't want to wake up and see like the shadow standing above me. And it's also been reported, by the way, that a resident actually did wake up one year to find a dark figure standing over a baby's crib. That would draw the line for me. I'm packing up and I'm getting the fuck out. That's it. Oh my God. I don't even know what I would do at that point, because it's just like, there's somebody watching my child that's not there and I know it. And I'm seeing it. And the baby's probably crying because they're probably also sensing it. I would just move out. At that point, leave it all, pick up the baby and like a bottle and whatever babies need, and like get out. And the dog, of course, we got to take the dog. So then, as you know, the mansion was turned into a school at one point. Whenever it was turned into a school, it became, first it was a school for boys and girls, and then it became a school for just girls, African American girls, in the mid to late 19th century. Allegedly, the girls would go up to the instructors crying and saying, or like having marks, like bruises on them, saying that they were getting attacked by somebody. And another source says some of the girls had whip marks on them. Like, okay, I'm gonna keep saying it. It's a part of our history that we can't erase. It's there. And even though they're trying to take it out of our history books, it happened nonetheless. Enslaved people, as a form of punishment, would get whipped. And they would leave horrific scars on the backs of these people. So it's many years later. There's no slavery. So there was probably segregation, and this school was all girls, African American girls. And they would come up to their instructors crying, bruised up, and allegedly having whip marks on them. And when the instructors or the teachers would ask who did this, all the girls would basically say the same thing. That woman, meaning the potential spirit of Delphine LaLaurie. Now, the instructors, the teachers, they did not say anything about the history of this building because they felt that the kids were too young to know what happened several years before in the LaLaurie mansion. Because these are like 6 to 8 year old children that are in the school. I think that's also, I'm not sure if that's appropriate or not to like tell kids that young, this is what happened. It probably wouldn't be a good idea to tell them because kids are kind of like scare easy. They'd be causing a whole lot of nightmare for them. So they didn't tell the kids about what happened. But they do know, and they have described a red-headed woman that would stare at them, that would hit them, and cause them to have marks and bruises on their body. I wouldn't know what to do, but if I ever had such an experience as that, I think that I would also just take the child out of that school and never look back. But that's it. I know nothing else. There was another incident. I got this from one of the Ghost City tour websites because I think they're pretty good sources, to me at least. They have some stuff that is questionable-ish, but also a lot of the stuff is pretty spot on and ties in with other portions of history that I read about through all this. So there was supposedly a medium who had gone to the mansion, and before the tour had even started, this medium was sensing a lot of stuff, like a lot of different energies around there. Within the first sight of the mansion, the medium took a deep breath and said, quote, "Such sadness," end quote. She whispered as she rocked back on her heels, pulling out her phone, and proceeded to snap a picture of the mansion. Quote, that the bricked up window, she went on, that's not where the little girl fell out of, end quote. And the tour guide hadn't even gotten to that part of the tour yet. So basically, the entire time the medium was sensing where a child had allegedly fallen out of a window or fallen off the roof. And if you remember from the last episode, that would be where the enslaved girl was being chased down by LaLaurie and ultimately either getting pushed or jumping to her death on the top floor of the mansion to either avoid punishment or was murdered. And that's possibly what the medium is picking up on. So that whole time the medium is just feeling really overwhelmed and just a heavy feeling. And if you've seen a medium in action, they feel it. You see that they are being affected by whatever energy is surrounding them at that time. It's pretty interesting to watch. Granted, I've only seen the mediums on TV with like Ghost Adventures or like any other show I'm watching. I think what I'm watching right now is called it's called Ghosts of Morgan City. I like that one. It's pretty good. It's in New Orleans of all places. So that might be what triggered me to want to do this anyway, aside from thinking about it and whatever. So it's possible she's sensing that, but she also sensed the spirit of a young boy. Nothing more was really said about that other than there was a young child that was there. I don't remember reading if it was a playful spirit or if it was just another child spirit that's just trapped in this mansion because their life was taken too soon and their soul, their spirit can't be released. There's something there. Or it could be that maybe the spirit of Delphine is there keeping all the other spirits that suffered at her hands trapped in this mansion. And even though the mansion is not the original one, it can still have parts of it, like the spirits, anything like that, intelligent spirits at least, they don't necessarily like renovation. So this mansion being converted into apartments, a furniture store, a bar, and a school, and then a refuge for teenagers, there's a lot of negative energy in there. And with each time that they remodel, it could be stirring up the energy that was there from the get-go, the energy of the slaves who passed on due to neglect, or the ones who were tortured there, who basically have never seen any other. They're trapped there. So whenever a renovation happens, that can stir up the activity, and that's possibly what happened with the schoolgirls that they had that experience and the man in the apartment complex. So whenever the medium is sitting here detecting and sensing a child, I'm just imagining that this poor little thing is stuck there because they were taken too soon and they were probably trapped there by the overwhelming strength of the negative energy in that place. Even if it's not all original, it's still on the grounds where that happened. And you can't take that away. So do with that what you will, basically. Do with that what you will. And if I did say something wrong, fine. Nicely correct me. Don't fucking cuss me out, please. I can't handle that. But just tell me, hey, this is what you should have said instead of this. Or, like, basically, I'm hoping that you guys understand me so that we can all be, like, on the same page. Because I know I can talk in a way that's not, like, directly on the point, but sort of is. I get it. And, you know, speaking of our history in this country, particularly in the South, there are spirits of the enslaved. See, it sucks that I even have to keep putting all this stuff on here and thinking that maybe it'll be okay. So we have the spirits of the enslaved. Now remember, I just said about how it's possible that the presence of Delphine LaLaurie can still be in this mansion. even if her physical body is not within the walls of the mansion, there's just so much negative energy that happened on those grounds that things will stay there. Energies, entities, spirits, they will all stay there. So we have the spirits of the enslaved. The spirit of an enslaved woman allegedly saved the life of a servant who was being choked by a, quote, pale black-haired woman, end quote. That's kind of wild, but also, I was not able to find who this alleged pale black-haired woman was. So, let's see. I'm reading my notes. It's been a few days since I've read my notes, so I'm kind of like refreshing myself as we go along. Basically, the one with the black hair was choking this, I think he was a farm worker. It might be a farm worker. Now, I don't remember there being a barn on the property, and I'm not exactly sure if we're still talking about the main LaLaurie mansion or if we're talking about one of the plantations that they owned. And it wasn't really specific, but since it was on this page where it's specifically about LaLaurie's mansion, then I'm going to assume that it is in fact on the mansion property, and it's just something that wasn't really important enough to be covered history-wise. So a worker, servant, they were being choked by this very intelligent and aggressive negative energy, negative spirit. And once the black-haired lady got the hands off the neck, they were pried off the neck by the spirit of the enslaved woman. Both of the entities vanished. Both apparitions gone, just like that. Out of his way. If I saw that, I'd be like, whoa! I would be scared. There's also the story, again mentioned twice now, that there was that apparition, the spirit of the enslaved man that blocked the stairwell whenever the mansion was in its apartment phase. And there's also some who have reported seeing the very spirit of the little girl who was pushed and or jumped off the roof of the mansion while brushing Delphine's hair and tugged a tangle. This lady was terrifying. So just remember that. The people would try to kill themselves or try to basically do anything they could to get the hell away from Delphine because she's that much of a monster to them. That is wild. So they also say that you can still hear the screams of this poor little girl who was killed or chose to commit suicide in order to avoid the punishment from LaLaurie. That is a strong residual energy. If that is a true story, if that is in fact 100% written in history, documented, you can find articles online, true, then that is a sick fucking energy to have for. And it's like I've said before, everything has to be within the perfect condition in order for a residual energy to happen, because it can be like clockwork, but also it can be clockwork not time-wise, but condition-wise. So the conditions have to be just right for this energy to go through it again. The moon has to be at the right phase. The weather, the temperature, everything has to be just right in order to have a residual energy happen. And some energies just do happen time-wise. Some can just like have a particular time of day that they just come out. Others have to have condition. It really varies, I think, and this is just my opinion. I think it varies depending on the type of situation we're talking about. So in this case, I think that it's a conditional type of residual energy where the conditions have to be like perfect to the night of when this incident happened in order to hear the screams of this child. And I could be wrong about that. You could definitely be, it could be like a certain time of night that it happened and it'll show itself. So for me, I could be wrong. Don't quote me on this. I could be wrong, but I really think that there are two different kinds. There could be the time residual, and then there's the conditional. I believe that everything is more conditional based than time, but I could be wrong. And I think that's pretty cool to think about. I think it's great to be able to document or to have witnesses that still to this day, years later, 100 years later, talking about how this fucking entity, this child, you can still hear the residual screaming of this girl. And I'm not saying it's cool what happened to her. I'm saying the evidence of the paranormal, the evidence of a residual energy, of residual haunting. I think those are very, very cool. Another thing that's said about the mansion, this is just a little bit of the last of my notes here. It's believed that the mansion is cursed. The property, the whole area of the LaLaurie mansion is cursed because those who have owned the mansion have come into rotten fucking luck. Some have had health issues, and many others have experienced financial ruin. Remember when I said Nicolas Cage owned it? He had to get rid of it because of financial issues that he was having at that time. Not sure what those were. I don't care enough to dig into it. Just know that that's what curse is believed to be part of the mansion. And I believe very much in curses of property. I think that sometimes on somebody's deathbed, they can lay a curse on something and that'll stick forever and ever. There's actually, I think, a few stories that I've heard based off of people setting curses as their last words and basically saying that this will haunt you for the rest of your life, for the rest of your days, for the rest of your family's generation, whatever. So I think that could be like a case of what happened here. Maybe she cursed any new owner as she fled town, and she isn't Delphine. Who knows? I sure don't. And I went back, like I said, remember last episode I was talking about Oak Alley Plantation where I had gone? I went back and looked through the pictures, and I didn't find it. I couldn't find any of the pictures that I was looking for. And I was trying to find the other one that I have. It's, it was taken on an old iPhone 4. Pitch black. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Big Spring, Texas. And that's definitely the middle of nowhere. Trust me. I think I don't even know what the population is. I know that there is a veteran hospital, and that's about it. So we went out to some properties that were not private. So these properties were just there. They're just abandoned houses, haven't been seen, haven't had a family in years, probably since they were fucking built in God knows what era. And I took this picture and I was like, okay, let me try something, because I knew there are some things that you can see with flash and some things that will show up without flash. And that phone in particular did not have a flash. I caught the weirdest fucking entity, the weirdest manifestation of a spirit that I could possibly have ever caught in my life. And I didn't know anything about photography. I knew absolutely nothing. All I knew is that when I went back and looked at the pictures I had taken, there was something on there that was not there, that I did not see with my very eyes. I know that the moon was full because there was just natural light from the moon, which it's not going to light up enough. It's got plenty of light, but not enough for it to be able to, I don't even know how to explain it. But the picture is it's pitch black, and then there's like a glowing face on it. And when I find it, it has to be somewhere on some device of mine. It has to be there. And I know it is because I fucking showed it to people before. But I really haven't gone out to Big Spring to see anything else. I know I want to get some paranormal equipment. I was supposed to get a voice recorder this past weekend when I went back to my parents' house, but I did not find the voice recorder either. So it's probably been put away and or gotten rid of. I'm not sure. But I know that I was kind of looking to get an EMF detector or a oh my god, I can't think of the thing. It's one of the devices where if the spirit touches it, it lights up. Not maybe it is an EMF. Maybe it's a different form of EMF. So I want that, and I was thinking about getting a spirit box, but things are expensive as hell. So I was like, well, the cheapest, best thing that I can do for me right now is to just simply find the voice recorder or use my phone. There's plenty of people who use their phones as a way to communicate with the paranormal or with the spirits. They download some apps on their phone. I think it's called Ghost Tube, I think. I'm not sure. But there's the thermal camera, there's the Spirit Box one, there's Ghost Tube. There's a lot of options just on a smartphone. Or really any phone, to be honest with you. And part of me is like, okay, I'm ready to go mess with this stuff. But I also don't want to have anything get attached to me personally and bring it home to anything. I've had stuff attached to me. So, I know this is completely not part of any of this. But, I mean, I just like talking. I just like talking to you guys. It's giving me something to do, some kind of sanity, right? Some kind of normalcy in my life. Which, my life isn't really abnormal. I'm very dramatic about it. So, I went on a ghost tour in San Antonio, and they handed us all some dowsing rods. If you don't know what dowsing rods are, basically you put one in each hand, and it's a little handle with wires or metal wires, and the metal wires can freely rotate. And you can ask yes/no questions, or I think they'll cross if there is a spirit in the area. So anyway, if you don't know what a dowsing rod is, I probably explained it horribly, but they are two sticks that you hold and the wire will cross if there's an entity. And so I was holding it. We went on the ghost tour. We saw a lot of new stuff there. I would probably go again just so that I can get more ideas from this that I can talk about on the podcast, on the show. But after that particular ghost hunting tour that I had gone on, there was just a lot of weird shit that happened to me. There was constant nightmares. There was just, when you feel like you're not alone even though you're alone. I had that feeling quite a bit. And it was pretty fucking scary for a while. And I really didn't bother to try to record to see if anything was right there. I didn't want to mess with it because I was like, okay, if it's there, we're just going to pretend it's not. But I did have a friend who was very much into the spiritual side of stuff. They gave me a cleansing, and after that cleansing and after just being released from whatever it was spiritually, I became better. I got in a better place for a while. But it was definitely an experience to go through that. I really can't it's been well over 10 years since that happened, but it was there. I remember it, and I remember things were very fucking dark for me. But I do know, next time I go to New Orleans, I am going on a ghost tour. I need to know more about the ghosts of New Orleans. And speaking of that, while I was there, I did actually go to one of the oldest bars in New Orleans where it is haunted. I think it's the Blacksmith Bar. It's like a small building, kind of slanted in roof. And it had like a bunch of old torches, like the little fire lanterns. That place is cool. I'm going to go back because that place has a spirit there, and I'm definitely going to be talking about it because it definitely is packed full of history. However, I am not going to get to it anytime soon. I've got many things planned for the next month, so hopefully things will work out in the way that I want them to. And we shall see what happens. So, once again, as many of you know, I have to put in the Suicide in Crisis hotline at the end of every single episode, or most of my episodes, because it means a lot to me. if you are having suicidal ideation or you are feeling suicidal, call or text 988. They're open 365 days a year, 7 days a week, and they are ready to help you. They've helped me in my time of need, and I know that they can help you. If you want to find me on social media, you can find me on Instagram at Alex again with 2 underscores, or you can find the podcast Instagram, paranormalartist.podcast. I also have Patreon, YouTube, and TikTok, all with the name Paranormal Artist Podcast. If you have an experience or a suggestion that you want to send to me, send me a DM, or you can send me an email at paranormalartistpodcast@gmail.com.